Trial of a Legend. Notes from a Journalist. Prologue. Cameras, heat, and anticipation. Los Angeles greeted me with the heat of July. The asphalt radiated warmth, neon signs flickered, and even the palm trees, usually symbols of laid-back resort life, seemed exhausted. But the most important events were not happening on the beaches of Santa Monica or the Hollywood Hills. The heart of the city beat around the county courthouse. By morning, a crowd had gathered at the entrance. People held signs: "Justice for Nicole," "Free OJ," "Stop Racist Cops." Some sold souvenirs, t-shirts with Simpson's portrait, pins, even cheap baseball caps with the inscription, "Trial of the Century." The air was a mixture of coffee, hot dogs, sweat, and the adrenaline of anticipation. Satellite television cameras rose around the building like metallic sunflowers. Journalists from all over the world took positions. Some were doing live broadcasts, others murmured notes into recorders. I realized that this was not just a trial. It was a show, a story that would become part of American culture. I came here from my newsroom to report daily. But within the first few minutes, I understood. This time I would not just witness. I would become part of the storm. In my notebook, I wrote the first sentence. This trial is not about a person. It is about a country looking into a mirror, afraid of what it sees. Chapter 1. First glance at the accused. I first saw Orenthal James Simpson, OJ, as all of America knew him, in the morning as he was led into the courtroom. He walked slowly but confidently, tall, muscular, in a dark suit, with a tie seemingly chosen to project seriousness and respect. This was no athlete on the field, no actor in an ad. This was a man fighting for his life. The courtroom buzzed. Some whispered, "God, he looks innocent." Others pursed their lips, staring at him as if he were a murderer. I watched his face. It was stone-like, yet there was something more in his eyes: fatigue, anger, hope that someone, anyone, would believe him. For a moment, his gaze swept across the press and seemed to linger on me. I felt a strange tremor, as if he were silently pleading, "Tell my story right." Around him was an army of lawyers, dubbed the Dream Team. Johnny Cochran, a charismatic speaker wielding words like swords. Robert Shapiro, a cold strategist. Robert Kardashian, a close friend, seemingly more a guardian of the soul than a lawyer. And a few others, lesser known but equally devoted. On the prosecution's side, Marcia Clark, a woman with dark hair and a penetrating gaze. She looked exhausted, yet there was steel in her voice. Her partner, Christopher Darden, younger but equally resolute. This was an arena. Everyone knew. At stake was not only Simpson's fate, but the public's trust in the justice system. Chapter 2. Crime Scenes. The first days of the trial felt like a long surgical operation. Prosecutors, like scalpels, dissected the events of that night. On large screens, photographs were displayed. Nicole Brown Simpson's body near her home. A blood trail along the path. Scattered belongings, signs of a struggle. Ronald Goldman, the young waiter, who was killed alongside her. Silence reigned in the courtroom, so thick it could be sliced with a knife. Some jurors turned away. A woman in glasses covered her mouth as if afraid to scream. Prosecutors stated, "Here is the evidence. DNA, blood, fingerprints." They were constructing a logical chain leading to only one conclusion: guilty. Defense attorneys objected. "Evidence could have been planted," said Cochran. "The Los Angeles Police Department has a long history of bias. We cannot trust them." I sat and took notes. In my journal, this is not just a murder case. It is a case about trust. Does America trust its cops? Does it trust its own system? Chapter 3. The Outside World. Outside the courtroom, the trial had its own life. On the steps, people argued, shouted, hugged, or cursed. Near the nearest cafe, journalists crowded around, passionately debating, "He did it." "No, he's a victim of the system." Maybe the truth is somewhere in between. I met two people who stood near the courthouse daily. The first, an elderly woman named Margaret. She had lost her daughter to a violent man and held a sign, "Justice for Nicole." To her, the trial was symbolic. If even a famous woman doesn't get protection, what hope is there for ordinary people? The second, a young student named Derek, wearing a t-shirt reading "Free OJ." He said, "This is about race. This is about the fact that a black man is always guilty in their eyes." This trial is our chance to show we will not be silent. Two people, two worlds. America stood between them, divided. At night, returning to my cheap motel, I watched TV. All channels, CNN, NBC, even local news, broadcast the same thing. It felt like a series, each episode ending with the question, what happens next? I turned off the TV, but the narrator's voice lingered. The trial of the century continues tomorrow. Chapter 4. Witnesses bearing the burden. When the courtroom doors opened again, and the first group of witnesses stepped in, I felt a strange excitement. This was the moment when the trial became more than a contest between lawyers. Here spoke people who saw, heard, and felt. Emotion returned to the forefront. The first witness called to the stand was Kathleen Bell, Nicole Brown's friend. She looked tired but resolute. Her voice trembled at first, but within minutes she spoke confidently, describing years of tension in the Simpson marriage. Her testimony was full of details about jealousy, control, the evenings Nicole cried in the kitchen. I saw defense attorneys taking meticulous notes, preparing for cross-examination. When their turn came, Robert Shapiro calmly, almost kindly, led the witness to points of uncertainty. His tactic was clear: make the jurors doubt any allegations against Simpson, even mundane ones. "Ms. Bell," he said, leaning forward, "you claim Nicole was afraid of her husband. Were you ever present for these instances? Or were they just her words?" The courtroom held its breath. Bell swallowed. "She told me, but I saw her bruises. I saw her flinch when he called." At that moment, I realized, truth here wasn't only in details, but in human feeling. And feelings could convince jurors more than any forensic report. Next came neighbors, police officers, family friends. They painted fragments: a dog barking on the night of the murders, a light in a window, a scream resembling a woman's. I saw jurors taking notes, heads bent, trying to assemble a complete picture from fragments. When Detective Mark Furman took the stand, the atmosphere shifted. His name was already in newspapers, and we all knew his testimony could be pivotal. He spoke confidently, yet there was something too rigid, too absolute in his tone. When Cochran questioned him about past racist remarks, the courtroom seemed to explode. "Have you ever used the N-word?" Cochran asked, his voice like a hammer strike. Furman froze. His eyes darted around the room. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everyone knew. The answer could be explosive. "No," he said finally, yet the no carried a weight of uncertainty. Later, recordings revealed Furman had indeed used racist language, striking a critical blow to the prosecution's credibility. But even in that moment, in the courtroom, I sensed it. Trust had cracked. Chapter 5. The Street Speaks. Every evening, leaving the courthouse, I entered the street's roar. Behind barriers stood dozens, sometimes hundreds of people: Simpson supporters, relatives of Nicole and Ron, journalists, ordinary residents of Los Angeles. They argued, shouted, held signs. Some believed O.J. was a victim of a police conspiracy. Others screamed, "The killer must be punished." I stopped by an elderly woman holding a sign: "Justice for Nicole." She wearily held her cardboard, tears shining in her eyes. "Did you know her?" I asked. "She was my sister's neighbor," she replied. "A good girl. And now she's gone." Here everyone argues about cops, about race. But someone killed her. Her words pierced me. In the courtroom, we sometimes forgot that behind speeches were two dead people. At the same time, I saw young black men raising fists, shouting, "Free O.J." For them, the trial was a symbol of fighting a biased system. Returning late to my hotel, the bar's TVs replayed the same footage: the trial, testimonies, expert commentary. America lived this trial, and I along with it. Chapter 6. The Glove. It was the day we had been anxiously awaiting. Prosecutors finally decided to show the jury one of the key pieces of evidence: a glove found at the crime scene. Young prosecutor Mark Darden brought Simpson to the center. In his hands was a pair of dark leather gloves. He stepped closer to the defendant, extending one. "Mr. Simpson, please put it on." The courtroom fell silent. I felt as if we had all stopped breathing. Simpson struggled to pull the glove on. He frowned, twisting his wrist, trying to fit his fingers into the tight leather. His face showed effort. The jurors leaned forward, skeptical. "It doesn't fit," he finally said, spreading his hands. The courtroom erupted. Cochran rose, smiling, delivering the line that would become legendary. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. I felt something inside me snap. This moment, this simple gesture with a glove, could negate weeks of testimony and evidence. It was theatrical, yet the trial's fate hinged on it. Later, experts explained the glove could have shrunk due to moisture and blood. Yet the emotional impact was undeniable. For the jurors, it looked like the key evidence had turned against the prosecution. I watched Simpson. He seemed to savor the moment. Confidence, almost relief, radiated from his face. Prosecutors looked as if someone had struck the trump card from their hands. Chapter 7. The Press Crusade. The courthouse corridors became so crowded that moving without elbows was impossible. Journalists from across the U.S. and the world transformed the trial into a near-theatrical performance. Dozens of cameras, microphones, photographers swarmed the entrance. I, wedged in the human tide, struggled to balance observation with participation. Each morning, pushing through the crowd, I felt part of a living river flowing to the same source, the courthouse doors. Every journalist sought a morsel of sensation, a lawyer's remark, a prosecutor's nod, a juror's smile or frown. At the entrance, we sometimes locked eyes with Mark Furman. His expression shifted daily, confident and cold at first, later tinged with tension. Rumors about his past statements spread, and the press thirsted for scandal. One morning, I witnessed a real press storm. Documents about his past were delivered, and the journalist crowd almost overran security to get first comments. I barely held my recorder as a colleague from NBC nearly grabbed it, trying to shout a question. It reminded me of frontline reporting, though we were fighting not for survival, but for headlines. In the evening, reviewing footage, I realized the trial had long ceased to be merely a murder case. It had become a symbol of America, divided, craving spectacle, weary of the police, yet fearful of crime. Chapter 8. Expert Testimonies. Trial days grew longer and more exhausting. Witness after witness appeared, criminalists, pathologists, ballistics experts. Their words transformed the courtroom into a laboratory where every drop of blood carried the weight of argument. One of the most memorable moments was a DNA expert explaining that the blood traces at the Goldman property likely belonged to Simpson. Silence enveloped the room. Only the scratching of pens on journalists' notebooks could be heard. But when Johnny Cochran spoke, the atmosphere shifted instantly. He questioned the expert about sample contamination, police handling, and adherence to protocol. The confident prosecutor witness suddenly lost his edge. Doubt settled in the air like an invisible fog. I watched the jurors. Some nodded, others frowned, and one woman even turned away, unwilling to listen. It was like a delicate juggling act, science on one scale, human bias and error on the other. When the expert left, I felt he had become yet another piece in a large chess game, where truth increasingly got lost between moves. Chapter 9. Shadow of the Past. The Real explosion came when Mark Furman's recordings surfaced. He had repeatedly used racist language and lied under oath. I remember journalists freezing as the tapes were deemed admissible. The courtroom's atmosphere changed. The ground seemed to liquefy beneath our feet, every step threatening to sink into mud. Furman looked pale, eyes downcast. Prosecutors tried to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. If the key witness was a liar, what about the whole case? Jurors seemed to absorb these details like sponges. Defense lawyers exploited the moment ruthlessly. They painted a picture of a police conspiracy aiming to frame a famous black athlete. That evening, walking the streets of Los Angeles, people discussed the trial at every corner. For some, Furman became proof of systemic racism. For others, an example of one individual capable of undermining an entire team's work. Truth, again, receded into the background. Chapter 10. If the glove doesn't fit. The climax came when Simpson was asked to try on the glove found at the crime scene. We journalists held our breath. In the courtroom, silence was deafening. O.J. tugged the glove onto his hand, but it looked strange, too small. He frowned, twisted his wrist, showing that his fingers wouldn't go in. I felt a click in the air. This moment would enter history. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit, Cochran would later say. Even without the words, everyone understood. The prosecution's case had cracked. Prosecutors explained the glove might have shrunk due to moisture or latex gloves Simpson wore beforehand. But the emotional effect was unbeatable. For the jurors, the evidence meant to convict now seemed to favor the defense. I watched Simpson. He seemed to savor the moment. Confidence, almost relief, radiated from him. Prosecutors looked as if someone had ripped the ace from their hands. Chapter 11. Final Arguments. The days of closing arguments were a true test. The courtroom was packed, cameras capturing every gesture, journalists straining not to miss a lawyer's lip movement. Prosecutors stood like rocks, cold and composed. Marcia Clark delivered speeches that sought to wring from jurors the real sense of loss and cruelty. Every word about Nicole and Ron, about their dreams and hopes that would never return, resonated deeply. Christopher Darden added emotional force. This case is about all of us. About trust. About safety. About whether we let ourselves be killed if we close our eyes to evidence. On the other side, Johnny Cochran spoke calmly and confidently. He reiterated his strategy. If you want to find the guilty, look where the evidence is sufficient. And if there is even one doubtful piece, do not convict. His words were like cold water on a heated room, precise, measured, dramatically restrained. Robert Shapiro, like a chess master, controlled timing and drew arguments to logical conclusions. Less emotional, each word struck at the heart of the question. Can we be certain of the evidence? I watched the jurors, their expressions my main gauge, what America was really thinking. Chapter 12. Voices of the Jurors. The most interesting part of the trial, jurors. Their faces, emotions, doubts, often mattered more than any testimony. I tried to notice each one. A young woman in glasses, often looking away during graphic photographs. Her eyes betrayed fear, not indifference. Perhaps fear of her own ability to deliver a verdict. A middle-aged man, incessantly writing in a notebook. His face unreadable, as if he wrote for himself, not the court. Other jurors occasionally exchanged brief glances, silently consulting. I realized that in the final stage, their voices mattered more than any lawyer's argument. Every detail, every doubt, every emotion influenced the verdict. And I, as a journalist, witnessed this incredible psychological spectacle. Chapter 13. Silence before the verdict. Before the verdict, the courtroom was filled with tense silence. Everyone tried to read the jurors' faces, but they sat motionless, like sculptures. Television cameras captured every moment. Outside, the crowd awaited news. Some prayed, others held hands, and some shouted, "He's guilty! He's guilty!" or "He's innocent!" My heart ached. My hand trembled with my notebook, yet I couldn't stop, recording every breath, every reaction. I knew this was history, a moment the nation would remember. Chapter 14. Verdict. October 3rd, 1995. The judge called the jurors to deliver their verdict, and the world seemed to pause. Not guilty. The explosion of emotion was immediate. Some celebrated, hugging and crying with relief. Others covered their mouths, crying in despair, pounding benches in frustration. Simpson relaxed his shoulders. His face radiated victory and relief. Defense attorneys embraced, thanking each other and fate. Prosecutors bowed their heads, weary after a battle they had lost. I sat observing, questions spinning in my mind. Was this verdict just? Did truth prevail? Did the system prevail? And did America truly witness justice or mere spectacle? Chapter 15. Epilogue. After the trial, Los Angeles and all of America had changed. Society split in two. Some saw victory over a corrupt police system. Others saw a disaster showing that fame and wealth could buy freedom. I wrote my reports, but I felt the real story ran deeper. It was the story of a country afraid of its wounds, biases, and inequalities. And the Simpson trial became a mirror for us all. In my notebook, I wrote the final sentence. I witnessed history, but the truth remained in the shadows, between evidence, between people, between hearts. Only time would reveal who truly won. Subscribe to the channel, share with a friend, and hit like.